you feel awe, you're more likely to help other people. You're more likely to behave in a humble way. And you're more likely, I believe, to be intellectually humble. People who were highly awe-prone tended to have the lowest level of kind of chronic inflammation, because big things certainly inspire awe. The Eiffel Tower here in Paris or the Grand Canyon. But vastness, in the technical sense, means it takes you out of your usual frame of reference that you're used to. And there are a bunch of other dimensions besides physical size that can do that for us.
Craig, it's so lovely to chat with you today. How are you doing?
I'm doing really well. Thank you for inviting me to talk about awe.
Yeah, sure thing. So, I'd love to just start with the question I ask all of my guests before we get started, and that is if you had to choose one strategy to boost well-being, what would it be and why?
Oh, I mean, that's easy for me. If I wanted to boost my well-being, I would book a trip to the outdoors, far away from the internet and screens. I've done whitewater rafting research that supports that. But anywhere where I'm away from technology and I can see the stars shine at night, that works for me every single time.
That makes complete sense, and it ties into what we're going to be chatting about today. So, I also, you study awe. We actually went to grad school together, so that's what made me decide to reach out to you. And I'm just curious. I don't actually know how you got interested in awe in the first place.
Yeah, that's an interesting little origin story, right? So I was born and raised in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And as a kid, I spent a lot of time in the outdoors. So through the scouting program, kind of spending time camping. And there's all these fascinating kind of ruins and evidence of the ancient civilizations that used to live in New Mexico. So that was awe-inspiring. And then New Mexico is rather sparsely populated, so there's not a lot of light pollution. You can see tons of stars at night. So I like to say I developed a taste for awe from a very young age. And then I got in college my first taste of psychology and psychological research with Iris, who you know well. I decided that I loved social psychology work. And then when it was time to decide to go to grad school, I looked around at, the people doing research, and Dacher Keltner, who was my PhD supervisor at UC Berkeley, was really the only person scientifically studying awe. So I was like, yes, that's who I want to study with. I want to combine kind of business and pleasure in my PhD work. And I think it worked out pretty well.
Yeah. And so I haven't heard about your research in a few years. What have you been studying recently related to awe?
Yeah, so in the last, few years since I've lived in the Bay Area, the big transition for me has been into a business school environment. So I'm in an assistant professor in the marketing department now at HEC Paris. And thankfully, I can still study all the things that I love, just with a little kind of consumer behavior twist to them. So kind of the first wave of awe research, as I like to describe it, is kind of like mapping out types of experiences, big effects that it can have on things like well-being and curiosity and pro-social behavior. But kind of one limitation, I guess I'll describe it as, is that these awe studies kind of focus on exceptional stimuli, right? Exceptional things. Taking kids from inner city Oakland whitewater rafting. Uh, it's great, it's powerful, but for the most part, most of us don't have access to whitewater rafting on a daily basis. So I would say that most of my work is now taking an interest in the awe that we can experience in more mundane, everyday contexts. Because we don't get to go whitewater rafting or up to the Arctic very often. So I think it's important to understand kind of the daily context better, because that's going to have a proportionally big impact on our well-being, is the day-to-day lives that we lead.
Yeah. And so this podcast is all about well-being. So I want to know what you've learned about how to create awe in the daily life, because we don't all live in a place where we go whitewater rafting. Or I'm very lucky. I'm in Colorado now, and so I get to go up to the mountains frequently. But if I wasn't, how would I create awe for myself and boost my well-being?
Yeah, I mean I think the science is still being worked on.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of initial proof of concepts comes out of UC San Francisco. So Virginia Sturm is a researcher working with older populations. And she had some of her participants kind of be randomly assigned to either take a awe walk or just take a walk. And the awe walk is something you can find those instructions on the Greater Good in action website, which I'm sure you're familiar with. And it's just kind of, take a walk and try to pay attention to things that you maybe miss sometimes that might be awe-inspiring. And it seems to have had some effects. Now, the element there, I think the active ingredient is kind of mindfulness, right? Taking the time to slow down and notice, the things that we miss when we're feeling hassled and we're feeling rushed. And when we do that, we notice that there's all sorts of awe-inspiring things around us. Now, in the work that I'm doing, I think it's becoming clear that when people hear the word awe, kind of they have this preconception that, oh, that means mind-blowing, exceptional things. And so they kind of have this idea that, oh, to experience awe, I need to experience something that I've never seen before, ever. And so that kind of maps onto one of the appraisals of awe, this need for accommodation, right? In order for something to inspire awe, we have to, kind of work a little bit to wrap our minds around it, right? It's not something that we're totally habituated to or totally completely understand. So that's kind of an extreme version of accommodation. So the other appraisal that leads to awe is called vastness. And that it's easy to mistake for physical size because big things certainly inspire awe. The Eiffel Tower here in Paris or the Grand Canyon. But vastness in the technical sense means it takes you out of your usual frame of reference that you're used to. And there are a bunch of other dimensions besides physical size that can do that for us. So social perspective, right? Kind of trying to understand how somebody else views the world, right? It's a totally new viewpoint for us. That can be a form of vastness. Going to a museum, and coming across an artifact from a civilization that's, tens of thousands of years old, right? That's temporal vastness. This is a way of life, a civilization that definitely is not in our typical frame of reference. A study that I really love, being from New Mexico, is that hot sauce can be vast. Okay. So they're making peppers so hot these days that I show people a 5-ounce bottle of hot sauce and say, by the way, the spiciness of this little tiny bottle is the equivalent to 10 gallons of Tabasco sauce. And people are like, wow, like that's incredible. That's awesome. So my work is kind of pushing on these boundaries of what can be vast, with an eye for kind of promoting more awe in our day-to-day lives.
That's really cool. So I'm curious, many of the things you talked about talk about the vastness being outside of us, like a big thing or a spicy thing. Is it possible to induce that internally where you just shift your own mindset and you're like, oh my God, like that flower is vast because of the way I'm seeing it? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, anything that takes us out of our usual frame of reference. Now, I've collected a lot of kind of narrative type data, right? I ask people, hey, tell us about a time that you experienced awe. Um, and occasionally people do say, hey, I did something or I accomplished something that I think is awe inspiring. And certainly, like reflecting on how far we've come in our own journeys, right? The struggles that we've surmounted. Um, I think that can definitely be awe-inspiring, right? And that's kind of all inside, right? That's all kind of coming from within us. I mean, to my knowledge, no one has looked at that. Have even begun
Yeah.
to try to understand that, but certainly that can be a form of vastness and that can be a form of awe, and people do talk about that.
Yeah, it makes sense. I know that there's not like a ton of research in this area, so I am asking you to sort of surmise your own opinions, just to put that caveat out there. But I'm just thinking
Yeah.
about my own experiences. Like, I remember this one time in Berkeley where I was just walking along and there was this flower growing between two pieces of cement. And I was like, that
Hmm.
is amazing. But I feel like it just had to do with the mindfulness, like you're talking about, of just noticing that. Whereas I grew up in Colorado with beautiful mountains that I never noticed as a kid. And so it's like,
Hmm.
seems like so much of it is about that mindfulness element. Do you have any data or insights related to whether that tends to be like a key ingredient?
I don't have data that speak to it. I think awe kind of at a trait level, right? Uh, people who are predisposed to feeling a lot of awe, they also often rate highly on mindfulness trait measures as well. And I think it all starts with attention, right? If you don't even register these things, you're probably going to miss out. That's probably true of all emotions, not just missing out on the kindness of your partner or your kids doing something funny if you're wrapped up in your work. I think it's probably generally true that the more mindful you are, the more positive experiences, generally speaking, that you'll be able to notice and take in.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. I think another direction I kind of wanted to explore is it at all related to openness to experience? So there's a very popular personality measure that measures different parts of the personality, and one of them is openness to experience. And it seems like if you were not open, perhaps you wouldn't benefit from awe as much, but I don't know if there's any data on that or if I'm just totally wrong. Do you have a sense?
Nope, you are absolutely right on. So I can tell you for a fact that in several papers, that kind of dimension of personality, openness to experience, I think it is the most highly related kind of personality construct that you find in like the big five that's related to awe. And I think it's true. Kind of the more closed-minded you are, the more resistant you are to new ideas, right? Remember, there's that necessary ingredient of accommodation, right? Things that are awesome, we have to wrap our mind around. They don't fit nicely into our schema of how the world works. So if you're closed, obviously that's going to be harder for you. So definitely, the more open you are, the more awe you experience at a trait level.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so you've mentioned accommodation and like not being able to get out into the world to experience awe. Are there other limitations or challenges that you've found to experiencing awe, either at the individual trait level or just like based on particular locations people live in, or maybe mental health issues that they're dealing with, or anything that could stop someone from benefiting from this as much?
Um, yeah, I mean, one fascinating kind of open question is kind of how does culture layer on top of awe and sort of affect, the downstream consequences. So my most recent paper, and Jenny Steller, who is a friend of ours, was the first author, uh, shows that you can show the same awe-inspiring stimulus to Americans and Chinese participants. The awe that they report is the same, but the Chinese people report more anxiety and fear. We don't know why. We don't know what the mechanism is. But if that's true, that could have implications for some of these positive downstream experiences, right? Maybe there's a weaker link, to well-being, in things like curiosity and pro-social behavior. Um, yeah, it could be that maybe there's because it was a nature stimuli, right? It kind of seems that this link between awe and nature is a very Western thing. In Eastern cultures, people are more likely to mention other people eliciting awe with them. So it's entirely possible that, it's that interpersonal awe that's really good for people's well-being, in that more interconnected type cultures. So these are, a lot of open questions that I think are really interesting.
Yeah, that is fascinating. And then, so we sort of were talking about some of the potential pitfalls for some folks, or maybe not even a pitfall, but like not as much benefit. But what are actually the benefits of awe? I know that's some of the older research I think that you and Dacker did, looking at like when people experience awe, what are the benefits to both themselves and the world, or humanity, or society, or other people, or whatever the impacts are.
Yeah. So in my mind, I kind of factor analyze it into three different kind of streams of research. And one of them is that awe seems to make people more curious. So I have a paper showing that people who are awe prone are very curious, and this in turn maps onto their academic performance. So we looked at high schoolers to be able to show that. Awe, what other findings are in there? So people engage in more scientific thinking. So they more easily grasp ideas like evolution, which requires like kind of a big zoom out, right? Kind of vastness is inherent to that understanding. Um, Kind of the second stream is pro-social, right? When we feel awe, do we inflate our ego, right, and make it all about us and how important we are? Of course not, right? Evidence shows that we feel smaller but more connected, right? Our attention turns outwards, and that includes the needs of others. So if you feel awe, you're more likely to help other people. You're more likely to behave in a humble way, and you're more likely, I believe, to be intellectually humble. I think we can use more intellectual humility in the world these days. And then, of course, germane to your topic, right? Well-being. Um, Very early evidence in Dacker's lab, we looked at kind of just tonic levels of inflammation, right? So generally speaking, inflammation is a useful tool for our bodies to fight, infections and disease and things like that. However, when those systems are active, it's a lot of wear and tear on the body. So it's actually a bad profile to have chronically elevated inflammation, right? We know that it leads to more heart disease, diabetes, a lot of wear and tear on the body. So if you're not sick, if you don't have an infection, a more adaptive profile is to have lower inflammation. And we found that, again, at the trait level, people who were highly awe prone tended to have the lowest level of kind of chronic inflammation. So, kind of early evidence that there could be strong ties to, what's going on in the body. And now, work that I've done has looked at how awe-inspiring experiences in nature can help people with post-traumatic stress. So in these studies, I got to take youth from underserved communities in the Bay Area and military veterans, so both at-risk populations that have a lot of PTSD, out whitewater rafting to see how that impacted their PTSD symptoms. So we saw, and we measured a bunch of other well-being stuff too, right? Happiness, social connection, and everything improved 2 weeks after the whitewater rafting, right? So it wasn't the same day. We waited to see, kind of give demand effects and effects to time to wash out if they wanted to. So 2 weeks afterwards, we found over 20% decrease in PTSD symptoms. And when we looked at the emotions people reported during the trips, awe, contentment, pride at having done this, laughing and amusement at having fun with your friends. Only awe predicted those changes in post-traumatic stress symptoms. So that was really nice evidence in these at-risk populations of the power of getting into the outdoors and experiencing awe. Now, subsequently, there's been some work like in JPSB also coming out of Dakkar's lab on how, again, these daily experiences of awe that people sort of indicate in daily diaries predicts lower sort of hassles on the day-to-day level. And it kind of makes sense, right? We experience things that are awesome. They make us feel small. As a result, our problems also feel smaller, right, and more manageable. So I thought that was nice evidence going back to the idea of, the importance of these daily experiences of awe being important for our well-being.
I have a question which you may not have the answer to, and that's fine. So, because awe is making you feel small, yourself is small, do you know if it's related at all to like the Buddhist construct of no self? Or like there's research that shows that when the self dissolves, like when people are using magic mushrooms, they,
Mm-hmm.
I think they might feel things that are similar. Do you know if there's any connections there to this no self concept?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting question, right? If someone is experiencing a state of no self, how would they respond to a question about how small their self feels? Like,
Great point.
it should be nonsense. Like, what is a self? I don't even know at this point. Um, yeah, I don't. So I guess the question is, I'm not sure. So there's an active group led by David Yaden, who's really interested in psychedelics, and he developed a measure for awe to kind of help him with that research. But yeah, I would think, at least in our Western context, most people don't have the vocabulary to even describe not having a self. I mean, it's so counterintuitive to our daily milieu of how we operate. I think it'd be really hard to measure.
Yeah, I mean, the reason I'm asking is because the last woman I interviewed, teaches people how to see this concept of no self. So it's on my mind, but I know that in our Western context, it is not something we study a lot because it's hard to wrap our minds around. So thanks
That's
for
right.
surmising. Okay, well, I also just want to get any last tips you have on how people can increase their sense of awe, maybe more related to your current work, something simple, easy, like eating hot sauce or learning about the hot sauce or learning some fact that they don't know about, or what can people do? What can I do today to increase my awe and thus hopefully increase my well-being?
Yeah. I'm not, I would caution people against going out and buying the hottest hot sauce that they could find. That is guaranteed to bring them pain. I don't know if that will bring them awe. Although it's interesting to note that people who do things like extreme hot sauce eating, extreme marathoning, other very painful experiences, that they also report kind of this, these bliss like states where uh, perhaps their sense of self is also diminished. Um, I think looking for ways to kind of broaden your horizons, right? Going back to this idea of vastness, getting out of our normal, everyday frame of reference that we're so used to. Easy ways we can do that is through, cultural experiences. I mean, being here in Paris, food is a way that you can do that, right? A cuisine that you've never had before. It just doesn't taste different, right? There's a whole culture and tradition behind it that can feel really vast. So taking other people's perspective, right? Giving you a new viewpoint on things like, hey, I never thought about things like that before. That can be a form of vastness. Um, I mean, good storytelling, right? Good storytelling literally transports us, right? It takes us out of where we are physically in time and space and takes us somewhere else. So that can be really awe-inspiring. So I think once we sort of begin to kind of let go this idea that awesome has to be, exceptional and once in a lifetime, that all sorts of things around us can be awe-inspiring if we sort of make the time and attention available for them.
Yeah, I love that. And so, Craig, if people want to learn more about you and your work, where should they go?
Well, certainly. So I have a website, and it is craigelanderson.com. There is already a Craig Anderson in psychology. Uh, he's much older than me, and I'm a lot taller than him, so you can't possibly mix us up. So the L is important. And then I have a faculty page at HEC, that's HEC in English, Paris. People can find me there as well. And there's been a lot of cool awe-related things that I've been able to be involved in recently. And you can find kind of coverage of that on my personal website.
Cool. Very exciting. Well, thank you so much for chatting with me, Craig. I will put the links to those in the section below this video. And I just had such a wonderful time getting to know more about your recent work.
Yeah, well, it's been a great pleasure, Chicky. Thanks for inviting me on.
Sure thing.